Guilty of contempt. Fined $20,000. The judge's deep voice thundered across the silent courtroom. People in the gallery gasped as cameras flashed, capturing every second of this shocking moment. Clint Eastwood, the famous actor and director, stood at the defense table wearing a dark suit. He did not look afraid. Instead, his eyes shone with a steady confidence, like he had known this was coming all along. The judge, known for his strict rulings, stared down at Clint from the bench. He seemed quite pleased with himself, as though he had finally managed to put a larger-than-life celebrity in his place. Whispers spread among the attorneys and reporters gathered. He can't seriously be punishing Clint Eastwood like that, can he? It's huge. He must want to make an example of him. The tension in the courtroom was as thick as fog. Some people glanced at Clint Eastwood, expecting him to protest or at least show surprise. But Clint did not flinch. He simply cleared his throat and spoke in a calm, measured voice. "Your Honor," he said politely, "if I may draw your attention to Section 48B of the State Judicial Code." He turned toward a stack of documents on the table, lifting a single sheet into the air. The moment those words left his mouth, a current of confusion rippled through the crowd. Section 48B. Hardly anyone, not even seasoned lawyers, had heard of it. The judge frowned as Clint Eastwood explained that, according to a special clause, a contempt ruling must follow specific steps, and the judge had missed one critical step. The people in the audience leaned forward, eyes widening. Even the judge's face tightened with alarm. At first, the judge tried to brush it off. "We'll address that later," he snapped. But Clint Eastwood held his ground. His lawyers began flipping through the musty pages of an old legal handbook. Soon, they found the exact clause Clint had cited. A stunned hush fell over everyone when they realized that Eastwood might be right. If that obscure rule applied, the judge's massive fine could be thrown out, or worse for the judge, reversed in a way that questioned his fairness. A long pause stretched out. Then the judge blinked, scanning the paper. His cheeks turned an odd shade of pink as he realized that he might have made a big mistake. The crowd murmured with excitement and disbelief. Reporters scribbled notes at high speed. It looked like the star director had outsmarted the court in the blink of an eye. Right then, as everyone held their breath, the lights flickered. A hush deeper than before drowned the room. The judge gripped his gavel, knuckles turning white. People stood up, straining to see what was happening. Was it a mere power glitch, or was something more serious unfolding? Suddenly, the flickering stopped, and the overhead lights blazed again. The judge opened his mouth, perhaps to withdraw his ruling or apologize. But in that tense second, a sharp bang echoed from the hallway. A court officer rushed in, face pale, and shouted, "Everyone stay where you are. There's a threat in the building." Panic ignited like wildfire. Shouts erupted. People leaped from their seats, pressing toward the exits. The judge looked both fearful and annoyed, unsure whether to hold the crowd in place or flee himself. Clint Eastwood turned around, scanning the chaos with the same piercing calm he'd shown moments ago in front of the judge. Time seemed to freeze, and all the complicated questions about the fine and the hidden code lingered in the air. What kind of threat would cause such a stir right at the moment of truth? Eyes darted from the trembling judge to Clint Eastwood, who remained steady, as though prepared for a showdown. That single heartbeat of silence was the turning point. And then the world exploded into movement. A few days before all this madness, Clint Eastwood's life had seemed straightforward. He had been working on a new film that promised to be both daring and thoughtful. People admired his calm way of running a production set. No screaming, no throwing tantrums. Yet in the background, unseen pressures were closing in. City officials claimed he was breaking rules by filming near a historic landmark. Environmentalists whispered that he was disturbing ancient nesting grounds. And rumors spoke of bigger schemes at play, involving real estate developers hungrily eyeing that same historic spot. Still, no one expected a legal storm quite like the one that now threatened to swallow him whole. It started with a notice from City Hall alleging that Clint's production team lacked proper authorization for shooting at an old courthouse building. The document accused him of ignoring recent preservation orders. That old courthouse had been slated for restoration, and apparently, some officials believed that Clint's lights, cameras, and set designs were disruptive. When Clint received the letter, he was surprised. He felt certain he had every permit needed. He even remembered signing a thick stack of papers about filming guidelines, insurance, and approval from local heritage groups. But one piece of paper, apparently, contradicted everything else. It was a new requirement, rushed through at the last minute, stating that no filming could take place within 50 feet of certain protected areas, even if prior permits existed. Frustrated but determined to remain polite, Clint tried contacting the city officials. He left messages, wrote emails, and even sent a legal representative to talk with them. Yet the city insisted on pressing charges, arguing that he'd violated the brand-new preservation rule. What began as a small spark quickly spread, until it became a full-blown legal confrontation. Bloggers and tabloids seized on the story, painting Clint Eastwood as either a disrespectful film director or a persecuted artist fighting for creative freedom. In the midst of the swirling rumors, Clint stuck to his calm, methodical style. He gathered his lawyers, professionals he had worked with before, people he trusted. They combed through the documents and discovered a mismatch in the dates. The city's new preservation rule had been enacted after Clint's filming permit was granted. Which rules took priority became a hot topic, leading to arguments that only a court could settle. Clint told his team, "We should be respectful. Let's meet them on their own terms." He had no idea that the judge assigned to his case was notorious for being tough on celebrities. The judge seemed determined to show the world that no star power could sway his courtroom. Unfazed, Clint prepared to defend himself with clarity and honesty. His lawyers suspected an uphill battle but admired his resolve. Meanwhile, the city's case grew stranger. They claimed that furniture had been moved improperly, old paintings had been shifted without permission, and even the building's foundation had been at risk. It sounded extreme, especially since Clint's crew had used specialized equipment to protect the site. Still, the city hammered away at these allegations, as though trying to corner him. Whispers started circulating that someone else might be influencing city officials behind the scenes, someone with an interest in demolishing the old courthouse for profit. Yet so far, it remained only a rumor. As the court date approached, tensions ran high. TV reporters crowded outside the courthouse steps, blocking sidewalks as they waited to catch Clint Eastwood walking in. Observers wondered if the famed director would speak up for himself or rely entirely on his legal team. When the day came, Clint arrived in a simple black car, stepping out to greet a flurry of cameras. He walked past them calmly, giving only a short nod in acknowledgement. During the initial hearings, the prosecution painted a damning picture. They showed photos of crates stacked in the corridors, wires taped along walls, and footprints in dusty corners. They insisted these were signs of disrespect toward the historic building. Clint's lawyers countered that everything had been done carefully, with permission. People on both sides of the aisle sat up straighter whenever Clint Eastwood took the stand. They expected him to be either defiant or apologetic. Instead, he was cool and courteous. He admitted that filming might have caused a little dust or minor alterations, but maintained it was within the scope of the permit. The judge eyed Clint suspiciously, as though searching for vanity or arrogance. He pressed him with question after question. Clint answered calmly, never losing patience or raising his voice. The spectators were fascinated. They expected drama from the movie legend. But he handled himself more like an experienced negotiator, carefully choosing words that showed respect for the court while defending his team's actions. Then came the pivotal day when Clint tried to clarify a misunderstood point about building codes. He politely raised his hand, saying, "Your Honor, I believe there is a document that addresses your concern." But the judge cut him off sharply, claiming Clint was out of order. Sensing an insult to his authority, the judge banged the gavel, demanding silence. He accused Clint of contempt for disrupting the proceedings. That was the moment the tension spiked. Many gasped, seeing how easily the judge had turned on him. The city attorneys looked almost too pleased, as if they'd been waiting for a crack in Clint's calm. Then, with a flourish, the judge announced a huge fine. Everyone in the room felt the weight of the ruling. It was not about money alone. It was a signal that the judge was losing patience and would not hesitate to use his gavel like a hammer. But Clint, unshaken, spoke up about that rare legal statute, Section 48B, revealing that the judge had rushed to fine him without following the correct procedure. And that's when everything flipped. People realized this wasn't just some actor on a stage. Clint Eastwood had studied enough law, or had been advised well enough, to turn the tables in a single breath. The confusion on the judge's face was priceless. It was a moment that hovered on the edge of chaos. Then the lights flickered, the officer burst in with the warning about a threat, and the courtroom exploded in frantic energy. By the end of that day, It was clear that not only had Clint Eastwood proven he understood the law better than anyone expected, but also that darker forces were creeping around. Bomb threats, sudden power issues, suspicious timings, none of it felt random. As the crowd fled the courtroom, Clint Eastwood stood near the judge's bench, his expression caught between relief that he might escape the unjust fine and worry about what was brewing outside the courtroom doors. That night, a single question stayed on everyone's mind. How had it reached this peak of chaos? At that point, no one could guess that deeper secrets lay hidden in the halls of justice, or that the fight to clear Clint Eastwood's name had only just begun. The courthouse doors slammed shut behind panicked lawyers, reporters, and local citizens. Outside, police shouted instructions, while fire trucks and ambulances arrived with flashing lights. People whispered that a bomb had been planted somewhere in the building, though no one seemed to know who was behind it or why. Clint Eastwood waited near the bottom of the steps, scanning the sea of frightened faces. He refused to leave until he was sure his team was safe. His head of security, a loyal friend named Reggie, found him amid the confusion and said, "We should get you out of here, Clint. This might be bigger than we think." But Clint shook his head, insisting they first gather his lawyers and assistants. Amid the swirling mass of people, Clint finally spotted his lead attorney, Darla Rogers. She looked rattled, her briefcase clutched tight against her chest. "They've cleared part of the building," she told Clint breathlessly, "but the judge and a few others are still inside." Clint glanced over his shoulder, remembering the uneasy look on the judge's face just minutes ago. Despite the judge's harsh ruling attempt, Clint didn't want anyone hurt. "We wait for them," he said, voice firm. The minutes dragged on, feeling like hours. At last, the judge emerged from the courthouse, flanked by 2 security guards. His once stern expression was replaced by a pale, shaken look. News cameras swiveled to capture him stumbling down the steps. The reporters tried to swarm him, but police pushed them back. Clint Eastwood and the judge locked eyes in a moment of shared relief. Nobody wanted an explosion or a tragedy. The city had enough problems without a courthouse disaster. But while relief settled in, new questions arose. Who called in this threat at the exact moment Clint Eastwood had won a key point in court? Was it a random coincidence, or something designed to distract everyone from the judge's slip-up with Section 48B? That evening, the courthouse remained sealed off. Officials insisted on performing a thorough sweep of the entire building. Police dogs and bomb squads searched every room. Meanwhile, Clint and his legal team relocated to a nearby cafe to regroup. They sipped coffee as quietly as possible amid the day's chaos. Reggie stood guard by the door, scanning every passerby with a watchful gaze. Darla looked over the day's notes. "You sure shook that courtroom," she said, trying to smile. "I had no clue you even knew about Section 48B. Clint shrugged softly. "I've been in the industry a long time. I listen closely when attorneys talk. I also read everything you send me, footnotes and all." Her eyes widened with respect. She realized now that the calm exterior masked a strategic mind. The tabloids usually portrayed Clint Eastwood as a rugged movie cowboy or a stoic police inspector. Yet behind those classic roles was a man who paid attention to the smallest details, legal or otherwise. They couldn't discuss it for long because the cafe's TV blared a special report. A news anchor spoke in an urgent tone about the courthouse evacuation. Then they flashed a headline. Secret clause. Did Clint Eastwood outsmart the judge? Darla's phone buzzed with messages from reporters. Everyone wanted to know what had really happened in that courtroom. Had Clint Eastwood just saved himself from a monstrous fine? Or would the judge strike back once the bomb threat was resolved? Clint rubbed his temples. He wasn't fond of making headlines for legal battles. He'd rather focus on making movies. But the drama now seemed unavoidable. "Darla," he said, "do we know if the city has more evidence against us? Something so big they might resort to weird tactics." She frowned. "We're still sifting through the complaint. Some of the charges seem exaggerated. I suspect hidden motives, a developer wanting that land, or a council member needing political points. None of it makes total sense yet." Outside, sirens wailed as more emergency vehicles rushed past. The world felt on edge, as if the ground might shift any second. Clint gazed out the window, remembering the judge's shock when confronted with the possibility he'd broken a rule himself. He wondered if the judge might become an ally now, or if pride would push him to double down. The city's legal team, too, would want to recover from their embarrassment in court. He half expected more surprises to appear at any moment. As the night went on, the cafe emptied. Darla and the rest of the team parted ways to get some rest before the next day's potential chaos. Clint walked alone to his car, bodyguards trailing at a discreet distance. He couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that someone was watching him from the shadows. Streetlights glowed in the dark, painting long silhouettes on the sidewalk. Every so often, a passing car slowed, as if its driver might be curious or had recognized him. When he got home, he found a small, unmarked envelope slipped under his door. Inside was a plain sheet of paper with blocky, typed words. "Stop stirring the pot, or this will get worse." Clint's heart pounded. This was no fan mail. It was a threat. Someone wanted him to drop the case, or at least back off. But Clint Eastwood was never one to be intimidated. Instead, the note only confirmed his belief that bigger powers were at work, and they wanted to silence him. Early the next morning, he met with Darla at a private office. He showed her the note. Her eyes flashed with concern. "We should report this," she said, but Clint shook his head. "We will, but first, let's see if it connects to anything else. We don't want to panic the authorities with just a piece of paper. People are already on edge after the bomb scare." She sighed, nodding. "All right, but be careful. If they're sending messages to your home, they might be watching your every move." They turned to the looming legal mess once again. Darla and the team planned a strategy. They wanted to request a new hearing date, but they also wanted to gather fresh evidence. If city officials were playing games, they had to expose it in court. Maybe they could show that the new preservation order was rushed or not enforced properly. Maybe they could find a link between the city council members and the real estate tycoons rumored to be eyeing the property. By noon, the courthouse reopened, and the authorities announced that no actual bomb had been found, just a fake device in a trash bin, likely planted to create panic. That discovery angered the judge, who seemed even more determined to restore order. He issued a statement to the press, blaming outside agitators for trying to undermine the integrity of his courtroom. Yet he did not mention Clint Eastwood's near victory with the obscure code. That made journalists even more eager to dig up the truth. As if things weren't intense enough, rumors began circulating that the police had found footprints in a restricted area under the courthouse, where old records were kept. A clerk claimed that some files related to historical site regulations might be missing. This led people to suspect that the bomb threat was actually a distraction for theft. But who would risk such a wild scheme just to steal dusty documents? Clint and Darla discussed the angle over lunch. "If someone stole documents, it might be to hide the city's wrongdoing," Darla said. Clint nodded. "Or maybe to frame us. They could plant files on our set to make it look like we tampered with official papers." The more they talked, the more they realized the stakes had grown beyond a simple dispute over a filming permit. The entire city's legal process seemed compromised. Late that afternoon, Clint stepped out onto a studio lot to check on his movie production. Despite the legal turbulence, he still had a film to finish. The crew was setting up a scene inside a well-crafted replica of an old ranch house. People ran around with lights and camera rigs, trying to stay on schedule. Clint admired their dedication. He wanted them to feel safe, not fearful that a bomb threat or shady officials would close down their work. But that calm moment was cut short when a studio security guard hurried up to him, face pale. "Mr. Eastwood, there's someone in the parking lot asking for you," he said. "She says it's urgent." She wouldn't give her name. Clint walked with the guard to find a young woman near the chain-link fence. She wore a simple shirt and jeans, her expression anxious. "Mr. Eastwood," she called gently, "I'm sorry to bother you. My father works for the city's preservation committee. I heard him talking about something, and I had to warn you." Clint waved the guard aside, stepping closer to the fence. "Go on," he said softly. The young woman glanced around nervously. "There are people trying to discredit you," she whispered. "They want your permit revoked so they can take full control of that courthouse. They don't care if it's preserved or not. Something big is going on. I think it's about money. Lots of money." Her voice trembled. "I shouldn't be here. But my dad keeps saying they'll destroy your reputation if they have to, that some council members are behind it, and that they have big plans for that old property." Clint listened carefully, heart heavy with concern. He wanted to ask her for proof, but he could see she was terrified. "Thank you," he said gently, "for telling me. If you remember anything else, please find a safe way to let me know." She nodded, tears in her eyes, then slipped away before security could ask more questions. Clint stood there, mind racing. Every new detail confirmed that unseen forces were indeed orchestrating a campaign against him, perhaps to snatch that valuable property. The deeper question remained: how far would they go to achieve their goals? Fake bomb threats, theft of courthouse documents, secret notes under his door. Was kidnapping or violence next? He swallowed hard, returning to the set with a sense of dread. But he also felt a fierce resolve growing. He would not let these shadowy figures bully him or twist the law. He had come too far, built a career on discipline and honesty, and he was not about to lose a fair fight against cowards hiding in the darkness. As dusk settled, Clint wrapped up the day's filming and prepared to leave the studio. A tense hush hovered over the lot. Everyone sensed that something big was unfolding behind the scenes. And sure enough, before midnight came, there would be another shock that rocked Clint's world, bringing this battle even closer to the edge, and into far more personal territory than he ever imagined. Midnight cast long shadows over a quiet Los Angeles street as Clint Eastwood unlocked the door to his home. After the chaotic day, all he wanted was a few hours of peace. Yet no sooner had he stepped inside than his phone buzzed. The number was unknown. Clint hesitated, then answered. A muffled voice whispered, "I have information about the city officials. Meet me at the old train station in 1 hour alone." Then the line went dead. Instead of feeling fear, Clint felt a spark of determination. This might be the break he needed. But he wasn't naive. Meeting a stranger at night in an abandoned train station screamed danger. He immediately called Reggie, his head of security, to help him prepare. Reggie argued they should alert the police, but Clint decided to keep it quiet for the moment. If we bring the cops, whoever called might vanish, he reasoned. Just stay nearby in case things go wrong. An hour later, Clint found himself standing beneath flickering station lights, their dull hum the only sound in the deserted area. Broken benches, graffiti-stained walls, and puddles of stale water created an eerie scene, reminiscent of a movie set gone dark. He peered into the gloom, waiting for any sign of movement. At last, he heard footsteps. A hooded figure emerged. "Mr. Eastwood," the stranger said in a low tone. "I'm taking a big risk. People have been threatened just for talking about what's going on at City Hall." He glanced around nervously, as if expecting attackers to leap out at any moment. He reached into his pocket and handed Clint a small envelope. Inside is proof that the new preservation rule was pushed through under suspicious terms. Some council members stand to make millions if the courthouse is shut down and sold to developers. Clint opened the envelope under the flickering station light. He saw photocopies of emails and bank transactions. He recognized a few city officials' names. It was concrete evidence, enough, perhaps, to show that the lawsuit against him was part of a larger plan to seize the property. But before Clint could read more carefully, he heard a sharp whistle. In the darkness, headlights cut across the platform, sweeping closer. The hooded figure stiffened. "They're here," he gasped. "Run." Without another word, he darted off toward a back exit. Clint slipped the envelope into his jacket. Then, with the instincts of a man who'd faced many on-screen showdowns, and had some real-life training too, he ducked behind a column. 2 large SUVs screeched to a halt near the station entrance. Doors flew open, and at least 4 silhouettes stepped out, scanning the area. Clint remained silent, heart pounding. Through a crack in the pillar, he saw them fanning out, clearly searching for someone. One pointed a flashlight toward the benches. Another hissed, "Check the east corridor." They moved with practiced stealth, nothing random about their actions. Just then, Reggie's voice crackled in Clint's earpiece. "Boss, are you okay? I see 2 black SUVs. I'm parked around the corner." Clint whispered, "Stay out of sight. They're armed, I'm sure. Don't engage unless you have to." He wasn't going to risk a firefight, but he was determined to protect the evidence he held. In the dim light, one of the men spotted a fluttering paper near the bench. It must have fallen from the envelope. He snatched it up, shining his flashlight on it. "We found something," he murmured to the others. "Spread out. Eastwood, or that informant, must be here." Clint gritted his teeth. If they found him, they would surely try to take the entire envelope, maybe even harm him. He crouched low, moving along the edges of the station toward an exit sign he remembered passing moments ago. If he could slip away unnoticed, he might protect the crucial proof. The men's footsteps echoed, coming closer. Clint waited for them to pass, then crept out quietly. He reached a side door, pushing it open onto a deserted alley. He took a single step when a hand grabbed his shoulder. Adrenaline surged as he spun around. It was one of the men, face half hidden by a ski mask. A short scuffle broke out. Clint's reflexes, honed by years of stunt training, allowed him to twist free. He jammed an elbow into the attacker's side, causing the man to stumble. But two more figures were closing in fast, shouting curses. Clint realized he was outnumbered. Suddenly, the roar of an engine broke the tension. Reggie's car screeched into the alley, headlights blazing. The attackers shielded their eyes as Reggie leaned out, yelling, "Get in!" Clint lunged into the passenger seat, and the car sped off. Bullets ricocheted off a dumpster behind them, sparks lighting up the night. But they managed to escape. Heart hammering, Clint clutched the envelope. Reggie drove fast, weaving through dark streets until they finally reached a safer spot. Who were those guys? Reggie breathed, glancing at Clint's bruised shoulder. Clint stared at the stolen documents in his hand. "I'd bet they work for whoever wants the courthouse property," he said. "We have to get this to Darla. It might blow the whole case wide open." An hour later, Clint and Reggie were inside Darla's office, door locked. Darla looked over the papers, her eyes widening with each page. Emails talked about secret deals, hush money, and last-minute changes to historical designations. Bank slips hinted that large sums of cash had moved from unknown corporations into personal accounts of city officials. It was everything they suspected, in black and white. She set the papers down, face pale. "Clint, this is massive corruption. If we show this to the judge—" She paused, remembering how resistant the judge had been. "Well, we need to be careful. We can't just wave these in his face. We have to do it properly, or it could be thrown out. Plus, these are copies, not originals." Clint nodded. "We should figure out where the originals are. The bigger question is, how do we keep these documents safe? You saw what happened tonight. They decided to store digital scans of the files in multiple secure places. Darla phoned a tech-savvy friend who agreed to help them encrypt and back up the data. Meanwhile, Reggie arranged extra security at Clint's home. None of them doubted that whoever had sent those armed men would try again. As dawn approached, Clint felt a mixture of triumph and dread. Triumph because they finally had a piece of the puzzle. Proof that the city's sudden interest in punishing him was more about money and power than any real concern for preservation. Dread because powerful enemies wouldn't just give up when threatened. They had resources, muscle, and no hesitation in using fear to get what they wanted. Sure enough, within hours, a new wave of trouble struck. A morning news channel reported that Clint Eastwood's production had secretly damaged the old courthouse, citing anonymous sources who claimed to have photos of the damage. The anchor spoke gravely about how Eastwood had no respect for local laws and insisted that the judge should shut down his filming immediately. Clint slammed the TV off, anger rising. He knew these allegations were fake, yet the public didn't have the proof he did. Darla reminded him that running to the media with their documents might compromise the investigation. "We have to present this evidence in court. Doing it in the news first could make it seem like a publicity stunt." He sighed, agreeing but feeling trapped. Lies spread quickly, and if they let them go unanswered, the public might turn against him. Then they received an unexpected phone call, the judge's clerk. She said the judge wanted a private meeting with Clint and his counsel before the next hearing. "He's eager to discuss the events of yesterday," she explained. Though the judge had a reputation for not bending his rules, he apparently realized something was very wrong. Maybe he wanted to set the record straight about the contempt fine. Maybe he suspected there were dark forces at play, too. Clint's heart thumped. This could be an opportunity to show him the new evidence, but it was risky. The clerk asked them to come the following morning, behind closed doors. No reporters, no cameras. Darla and Clint agreed it was worth trying. But they also knew they had to be cautious about revealing the documents too soon. Meanwhile, Reggie insisted on driving Clint everywhere. The attack at the train station proved the stakes had risen to a dangerous level. Armed men, shady deals, black SUVs chasing them. This was no ordinary lawsuit. "Let's not forget the bomb scare at the courthouse," Reggie said grimly. "They'll do anything to distract, intimidate, or even destroy evidence. We might be dealing with serious criminals." Despite the looming threats, Clint refused to live in fear. He returned to his film set, giving instructions to his crew and guiding them with the same steady presence they had always known. The employees trusted him, though some whispered about the rumored threats. They watched him with admiration, respecting how he pushed forward without letting shadows consume him. Night fell again, but rest remained elusive. Clint spent the evening poring over the documents, searching for more clues about who stood behind the corruption. One name, in particular, kept popping up: Neville Garza, a real estate magnate rumored to have close ties to the city council. If they could connect him directly to the false charges against Clint, the entire scheme might be exposed. By the time the moon was high, Clint was exhausted yet determined. He stared out his window at the quiet street, thinking of the hooded informant who had risked so much to deliver these papers. He wondered if that person was safe, or if the men at the station had caught him. The weight of responsibility pressed on Clint. He knew he had to see this through, not just for his own sake, but for truth and justice. Tomorrow, they would meet with the judge. Tomorrow, they might tip the scales if they played their cards right. But a flicker of fear still tugged at him. The enemies lurking in the dark wouldn't stand idle. And so, Clint Eastwood stood at the edge of a deeper mystery, ready to fight for the truth, even as the storm clouds gathered thick and threatening on the horizon. Morning broke crisp and golden. Clint Eastwood and Darla Rogers arrived at the judge's chambers in a subdued mood, flanked by 2 court officers who confirmed their appointment. The corridors were quieter than usual, the bomb threat from the previous day still weighing heavily on everyone's minds. The judge's clerk led them to a small office where the judge waited behind a sturdy oak desk. This time, the judge's demeanor was different from his stern performance on the bench. He looked tired, perhaps embarrassed. He waved them in, clearing his throat. "Mr. Eastwood, Ms. Rogers," he said, "I asked you here because yesterday's events were extraordinary. I want to ensure that justice is served correctly." Clint didn't trust the sudden friendliness, but he reminded himself that judges were human too. The man had nearly inflicted a massive fine on him, only to discover he might have made a mistake. Then came the bomb scare. Clint chose his words carefully. "Thank you, Your Honor. We also want a fair process. We believe there is more to this case than meets the eye." The judge nodded, tapping his pen. "I have reason to suspect that external influences may be tampering with our legal proceedings. I'd like to see any evidence you have that might explain, well, these suspicious events." Darla glanced at Clint, who gave a slight nod. She hesitantly produced a copy of a few pages from the envelope, the less explosive ones that still hinted at corruption without revealing every detail. The judge's brow furrowed as he read. Emails from city officials, mention of payoffs. He leaned back, exhaling sharply. "This is serious." Clint carefully explained. "We have more. But it's risky to share here without proper protection. My team and I were almost ambushed last night by armed men. Somebody doesn't want this information out in the open." The judge's features hardened. For a moment, he looked genuinely concerned. "I was warned by security that if criminals are indeed behind these claims, they might try to sabotage the entire case. Let me be frank, I have my doubts about a large conspiracy, but I also can't ignore the evidence. I'm willing to protect these documents and allow a special hearing if you can gather more proof." Relief mingled with caution. This was at least a step forward. Darla said softly, "We appreciate that, Your Honor. We'll do our best to bring full clarity to the court." As they left the judge's chambers, Clint caught a glimpse of the judge's expression, confusion mixed with worry. It suggested the man realized the lines between law and criminal intent had blurred far more than he'd imagined. Outside, the hallway buzzed with a few curious onlookers. Clint kept quiet about the meeting's details. However, as he and Darla passed a marble column, they spotted a tall, silver-haired man in a designer suit leaning against the wall. He wore a smirk that sent a chill down Clint's spine. "Mr. Eastwood," the man greeted smoothly. "Nice to see you. I'm Neville Garza," the name that had repeatedly surfaced in the corrupt documents. Clint offered a polite nod, but nothing more. Garza's smile didn't waver. "I hear you've had quite the ordeal. Bomb threats, secret evidence, the real drama. Must be tough, trying to finish your movie under these conditions." Darla bristled. "And you're associated with the city in what capacity?" Garza chuckled. "Just a concerned citizen. I'm passionate about preserving old buildings, or redeveloping them if needed. Not to mention, I do have a knack for sniffing out good opportunities." Something about his tone implied he knew exactly what Clint had discovered. Clint kept calm. "If you'll excuse us, Mr. Garza, we have business to attend to." Garza gave a mock bow, stepping aside. As they left, Clint felt Garza's gaze like a hawk's eyes on the back of his neck. Once out of earshot, Darla whispered, "He's definitely involved." That arrogance was no accident. They exited the courthouse into bright sunshine, but Clint felt the day had turned darker. Garza was wealthy, influential, and apparently not afraid to make his presence known. The fact he confronted Clint so openly meant he was either very confident or trying to intimidate them, or both. That afternoon, Clint had a meeting scheduled with a local preservationist who had once worked at the same site he was filming. This expert, Dr. Cynthia Park, had done historical research and might confirm that Clint's team had been careful with the property. The meeting took place in a small museum office, surrounded by old books and photos. Dr. Park offered a soft smile as she showed them documents proving the building's original structure was still intact. "Your crew never removed or broke anything crucial," she said. "I oversaw some of their work myself." Darla sighed with relief, flipping through the documents. "This will help defend Clint against accusations of damaging the courthouse." Dr. Park nodded. "I'm happy to testify in court, but be warned, certain people at City Hall have been pressuring experts to keep quiet. It's unusual. Makes me think they have an agenda." Just as the conversation ended, Darla's phone buzzed. She picked it up, and her face went pale. "Our office was broken into again," she whispered to Clint. "The receptionist is in tears. Computer files are missing." Dr. Park gasped, and Clint clenched his jaw. They'd taken steps to secure digital backups, but if the burglars were persistent, they might keep coming until they found what they wanted. They rushed to the office, finding the place in disarray. Police milled about, questioning staff. Desks had been overturned, file drawers yanked out, and computers smashed. A detective pulled Clint aside. "Any idea who might do this?" The people who did it knew exactly what they were looking for. They took certain folders, leaving others untouched. Clint tried to remain calm. "We're dealing with a high-stakes legal case. This is likely intimidation." Darla knelt beside a toppled filing cabinet, rummaging for anything left behind. She found only scraps of paper. "They must have targeted the research on Garza and city officials," she said, trembling with anger. "But they won't find the backups." Clint was relieved they'd hidden the real bombshell documents elsewhere. Still, the break-in rattled them all. Outside, the evening sky glowed orange. Police tape fluttered, and the hum of city traffic reminded Clint of how, just days ago, his life had been far simpler. Now, each day brought new threats. He gently placed a hand on Darla's shoulder. "We're still in this fight. They're scared because we have proof. That means we have a chance." As if on cue, Clint's phone rang. A low voice said, "I saw on the news about your office. I have the originals you need. Meet me tomorrow morning at Riverside Park." Then the caller hung up. The number was blocked. Clint stared at the phone, heart pounding. Another tip, possibly from the same informant who approached him at the train station? Was it a trap? "Are you going?" Darla asked quietly. Clint nodded. "We have to. If the real documents exist, the ones that could incriminate Garza and his allies, it might close the case and protect the courthouse. But we'll have to be smarter this time. No more near misses." They made a plan. Reggie would arrange discreet security. Darla would inform the police, but not broadcast it. If this was a genuine lead, they couldn't let criminals snatch it away. At the same time, they had to be ready for an ambush. After all, these people had no qualms about bomb threats or forced break-ins. That night, Clint felt the weight of everything pressing down on him. He strolled through his living room, looking at posters from his old movies. Scenes of dusty western streets or gritty city back alleys reminded him of fictional battles against villains. Now he was in a real one, a high-stakes showdown with hidden enemies who valued money over decency. His phone chimed again, this time a text from an unknown sender. *, be very sure you want to meet. We won't be so kind next time. *, the threat left him cold. But it also steeled his resolve. Clint Eastwood had spent a lifetime standing firm in the face of adversity, and that wasn't about to change. Early the next day, he met Darla and Reggie at a diner before heading to the park. Over black coffee and eggs, they reviewed the plan. Reggie's team would watch from different vantage points. Darla would wait in a safe spot with a getaway car. Clint alone would approach the contact. If it was real, they'd get the evidence and leave quickly. If it was a setup, they'd have backup ready to intervene. Cautiously optimistic, they set out for Riverside Park at dawn, hoping this was the break they needed. What they did not know was how quickly hope could turn to chaos, or that within the next few hours, another life-altering confrontation would unfold, one that would test Clint's courage and add a whole new layer of danger to an already explosive situation. Riverside Park glittered in the early morning sun, the calm water reflecting golden light as joggers and dog walkers passed by. Clint Eastwood walked slowly, scanning the area for anyone who might be waiting for him. Up ahead, a figure in a gray sweatshirt stood by the river's edge, looking down at the water. That could be his informant, or it could be someone else entirely. From a distance, Reggie watched through binoculars. He signaled that no one else seemed suspicious. Clint approached cautiously. As he neared, the figure turned, face partially hidden by the hoodie's shadow. "You came," they murmured. It was a man's voice, steady but nervous. He reached into a backpack and pulled out a slim file folder. Clint's heart pounded. If this folder contained the original documents proving city corruption, they might have the final puzzle piece. He opened it enough to glimpse official seals, signatures, and more incriminating details about council members receiving bribes. It looked authentic. "Who are you?" Clint asked quietly. The man hesitated. "Let's just say I once worked for someone tied to Garza. When I realized they were framing you, I couldn't be part of it anymore. But they'll kill me if they find out I gave you these." Before Clint could respond, the man's eyes darted behind Clint. "We've got company," he hissed. Clint whirled around to see a black SUV pulling up at the park entrance. The doors flew open, and two men jumped out, scanning the shoreline. "Go," Clint urged, grabbing the folder. The informant bolted in one direction, while Clint tried to blend into a crowd of morning walkers. But the men spotted him almost instantly. They charged forward, ignoring the startled cries of onlookers. One brandished a firearm, concealed under his jacket. Suddenly, the sound of an engine roared. Reggie, in a nondescript sedan, swerved onto a nearby walkway, honking to clear bystanders. Clint sprinted toward the car. The men gave chase, shouting, "Stop!" But Clint dove into the passenger seat, and Reggie floored the gas pedal. Tires screeched on the asphalt, and the black SUV rumbled after them. People scattered, shouting in alarm. Darla, parked in another car, tried to follow behind, but the SUV blocked her. The chase sped out of the park and onto side streets. Clint clutched the folder tight against his chest as Reggie wove through traffic. Gunshots popped, punching holes in the car's rear window. Reggie cursed, swerving to avoid a truck. "Keep down," he yelled. Clint ducked, heart racing, but still aware that if they crashed, they could lose everything. He risked a glance back. The SUV thundered behind them, headlights glaring like angry eyes. They twisted through narrow alleys, the city's early traffic their only shield. At one intersection, Reggie took a sharp turn, nearly colliding with a delivery van. Horns blared. The SUV had to brake suddenly, buying them a few seconds. Reggie jammed the accelerator again. "We're heading for the warehouse district," he said. "There are more places to hide." Clint's mind buzzed. He needed to get these documents somewhere safe. The SUV reappeared, sliding around a corner. Another round of bullets tore at the sedan's bumper. Reggie cursed under his breath. They were almost out of time. Just then, an unmarked police car, responding to frantic 911 calls about a high-speed chase, swerved onto the street behind the SUV, sirens blaring. Caught between chasing Clint and fleeing the cops, the SUV skidded. Its tires screeched as it fishtailed, smashing into a row of trash bins. Smoke hissed from its hood. Clint exhaled in relief. They sped off, leaving the battered SUV behind. At last, Reggie brought the sedan to a stop in an abandoned lot. The front tires smoked from the wild chase. They got out, hands shaking. Clint opened the folder. The documents remained intact, though his own adrenaline still surged. "We have to get these to a safe place immediately," he said. Reggie nodded. "Let's get them scanned and hidden before anyone else finds us." They phoned Darla, who'd lost them in the chase. She arrived half an hour later, breathless but unharmed. She ushered them into her car and rushed to a private tech office run by a trusted friend. Once there, they digitized every page. The content was explosive. Signatures of council members, deposit slips from Garza's company to personal bank accounts, emails confirming the plan to label Clint's filming as destructive so they could force him off the historic site. Then they'd swoop in, demolish the building, and put up a new development. Darla paced, her voice trembling with outrage. They were counting on the judge siding with them. They never expected you to fight back, much less to catch them red-handed. She turned to Clint, eyes ablaze. "This is enough to blow the entire conspiracy out of the water." But Clint looked grim. "They won't go down quietly. They've already shown they're willing to use violence." Sure enough, The day's news carried fresh headlines about the morning shootout in Riverside Park. Police statements mentioned an unknown suspect who fired at a vehicle. There was no mention of Clint Eastwood by name, which was a relief. But Garza soon appeared at a press conference. He shook his head gravely, stating, "We must stop the senseless chaos threatening our cherished landmarks. I stand with City Hall to protect historic sites from reckless filming." His words dripped with hypocrisy. Clint watched the broadcast with clenched fists. Then, just as the press conference ended, the network showed a short clip, the judge himself stepping out of the courthouse saying, "I will not be intimidated by outside events." A special hearing is scheduled for tomorrow afternoon to revisit the case against Mr. Eastwood. We will examine new evidence. Justice will prevail. Clint's heart lifted slightly. This was the moment of truth. If they presented their documents correctly, the judge could dismiss the charges against Clint and maybe even order an investigation into Garza's dealings. But it also meant Garza and his allies would make a final push to stop them. Feeling the weight of that responsibility, Clint and Darla spent the night assembling a structured case. They labeled each document, prepared affidavits, and created a timeline showing how the city's new rule was rushed to coincide with Garza's real estate plans. It was a mountain of evidence. Meanwhile, Reggie coordinated with the police. After the shootout, the police were more willing to listen. Clint insisted they keep everything under wraps until the hearing. No leaks. He feared a bigger attack if the criminals realized how much proof they had. The next morning, Clint woke early, a tight knot in his stomach. He checked in with Darla, who was already at the courthouse, ensuring their files were safely in the judge's custody. Security had been doubled. Everyone was on high alert. The earlier bomb scare, the break-ins, the high-speed chase. People felt a sense of dread that anything could happen. As Clint pulled up to the courthouse in a secure vehicle, he saw the steps lined with uniformed officers. Reporters clamored behind barriers, yelling questions. He kept his head down, ignoring the camera flashes. Inside, the corridors buzzed with a tense hush. He reached the courtroom, finding Darla seated at the defense table, an air of determined focus around her. The city's lawyers looked uneasy, not the confident team they were at the start of this ordeal. As for Garza, he did not appear in person, claiming through his attorney that he had no direct involvement in the city's case. Clint suspected Garza was close by, possibly orchestrating last-minute maneuvers from somewhere else. Then the judge entered, wearing a solemn expression. The bailiff called the court to order. Cameras were not allowed inside, but the press lingered outside, waiting for any scrap of information. Clint took a deep breath, remembering how just a day ago the judge had nearly fined him for contempt. Now the tables had turned. Darla stood, addressing the court. She outlined their new evidence, handing the judge meticulously organized folders. Step by step, she explained how Garza's corporation and certain city officials had conspired to force Clint's production out under false pretenses. She also described the threatening behavior, the attacks, and the attempts to steal or destroy their files. Occasionally, the judge peered over his glasses at the city's lawyers, who squirmed uncomfortably. One tried to object, claiming the documents weren't verified. But Darla calmly pointed out official seals, matching signatures, and bank records. The judge's face grew stern as he flipped through page after page, occasionally pausing to ask clarifying questions. Finally, the judge looked up. This evidence is serious. If these documents are genuine, the entire premise of the city's lawsuit against Mr. Eastwood is undermined. Moreover, there could be criminal liability for those behind these manipulations. A hush fell. Clint glanced at Darla, feeling relief wash over him like a tide. But the judge wasn't finished. He turned to the city lawyers. "I assume you have an explanation?" The lead attorney stood, stumbling over his words. We need time to review these allegations, Your Honor. We were unaware of any impropriety." The judge nodded. "Understood. We will pause for a short recess. Then we'll resume to finalize how we proceed." He tapped his gavel, and the tension in the room crackled. Clint exhaled. A few onlookers in the gallery shot thumbs up at him. For the first time since the trial began, he felt victory close at hand. Yet as soon as he stepped outside for the recess, an officer rushed up, whispering something urgent to him and Darla. A terrible chill spread through Clint. The officer explained that someone had abducted one of the key clerks who had handled the original court permits. A note was left behind. "Stop the hearing, or the clerk dies." The policeman said, We don't know if this is connected to your case, Mr. Eastwood, but the timing is suspicious. Clint's stomach dropped. Was this another tactic from Garza's people, or some other unknown faction? His heart pounded as he realized the trial wasn't just about documents anymore. Lives were now at stake. If the conspirators threatened the clerk, they might do worse. Before he could even think, the bailiff called everyone back into the courtroom. The judge wanted to continue. Clint's mind raced. Should he reveal the kidnapping? Would that cause the judge to halt the proceedings and let the conspirators win? Or should he push forward, hoping the law would triumph before more harm could be done? The tension rose to a fever pitch. As Clint re-entered the courtroom, he felt torn between doing what was right for justice and protecting an innocent life. The echoes of the past days, the bomb scare, the break-ins, the shootout, clashed in his head. Now, with a hostage in the balance, the risk had become terrifyingly personal. He glanced at Darla, who wore the same worry in her eyes. They had come so far. They were on the brink of victory. But one wrong move could cost someone's life. And so, with a heart as heavy as the gravity of the moment, Clint Eastwood took his seat, bracing himself for the final phase of this harrowing legal battle. The judge called the courtroom to order, unaware of the abduction that had just been reported to Clint and Darla. As the lawyers for the city mumbled and shuffled their papers, Clint felt the weight of the note threatening the life of the missing court clerk. He leaned toward Darla and whispered, "We have to tell the judge, or at least the bailiff." She nodded, equally anxious. But they hesitated. Any sudden announcement might lead the kidnappers to harm the clerk. The judge cleared his throat, focusing his gaze on Darla. "Ms. Rogers, please continue presenting your evidence." Darla rose, her voice shaking slightly as she submitted new affidavits from experts like Dr. Park. The judge listened intently, scribbling notes. Meanwhile, Clint's mind whirled. He knew they needed to rescue the clerk. If they exposed the criminals fully, maybe that clerk would no longer be a valuable hostage. As Darla finished, the judge turned to the city's lead attorney. "Do you have any rebuttal?" The attorney shot nervous glances at his colleagues, who looked equally unsure. Your Honor, we maintain that Mr. Eastwood's filming caused damage to the structure, but we admit these new documents raise questions about some officials' conduct. We request more time to investigate." The judge frowned. "That's reasonable, but the court cannot ignore the seriousness of the claims here. Allegedly, certain city officials manipulated regulations to gain financial profit. This is not a mere procedural hiccup. We must." Suddenly, a deputy entered, handing the judge a sealed note. The judge read it, eyes widening. He looked at Clint and Darla, then at the city attorneys. "We have an emergency situation," he announced. "Court is in recess until further notice. I ask everyone to remain in the building." He banged his gavel and stood abruptly, stepping through a side door. The gallery burst into murmurs. Clint suspected the note contained the kidnapping information. He and Darla followed the judge into his chambers, along with a few officers. There, the judge's face was pale. "I understand a court clerk has been abducted, and that this might be connected to our proceedings." His voice trembled with anger. Darla confirmed it. "Your Honor, we've just learned about the clerk. The kidnappers warned us to stop the hearing, or they'd hurt her." The judge slammed his fist on the desk. "This is an outrage." He exhaled a shaky breath, then forced himself to remain calm. "I won't be blackmailed, but we do need to ensure the clerk's safety. The police will handle the rescue. Meanwhile, we must push forward carefully." Clint admired the judge's new resolve. Perhaps seeing the depths of corruption had shifted his perspective. Still, the threat was real. The judge told them he would remain in the courthouse with officers while the police set up a rescue operation. "I won't let criminals hijack my courtroom," he declared. As the afternoon wore on, tension filled every corner of the courthouse. Darla and Clint waited in a quiet conference room, guarded by 2 officers. Outside, the city's attorneys whispered among themselves. News of the abduction leaked, sending shockwaves through the building. Some staff began to fear for their own safety. Then, around dusk, a detective arrived with an update. "We have a lead on the kidnappers," he said grimly. "We believe they're holding the clerk in an abandoned warehouse near the docks. We're preparing a SWAT team. Mr. Eastwood, you're not obligated, but if you have any information that might help, we need it now." Clint told them about the black SUVs, the men who chased him, and the suspicious ties to Neville Garza. The detective listened carefully, nodding. "We've heard the name Garza before, but he's slippery. If we catch his goons in the act, maybe we'll finally have something on him." As the police mobilized, Clint felt torn. A part of him wanted to join the rescue to ensure the clerk's safety. But he also knew that stepping into a SWAT operation might add complications. His place was in the courthouse, finishing what he started, stopping the conspiracy in the open. He resolved to let the professionals handle the rescue while he prepared to reveal the final nail in Garza's coffin. Word spread that the SWAT team was about to strike. Journalists outside sensed something big was unfolding and pressed for details. Tensions in the courtroom soared to a boiling point. Some city attorneys began talking about dropping the case entirely, evidently panicked by the kidnapping scandal. But the judge insisted they remain until a proper resolution was reached. In the late evening, a swirl of uniformed officers rushed through the corridors, whispering into radios. Clint and Darla heard footsteps pounding, doors opening and closing. Their hearts raced, waiting for news. Then, after an agonizing wait, a police captain entered the conference room. He wore a triumphant yet somber expression. "We found the clerk," he said. "She's alive, though roughed up. We arrested 2 of the kidnappers. They're already singing about who hired them." A wave of relief washed over Clint and Darla. They both sank into chairs. The clerk was safe, and if the kidnappers were talking, it could link the crime directly to Garza or his associates. A short time later, paramedics wheeled in the shaken clerk, who recognized Clint and gestured weakly for him to come closer. "Mr. Eastwood," she croaked, tears streaming down her face. "They told me they were doing this because you wouldn't back down. They wanted to scare you. They said their boss had city officials in his pocket. They wanted me to lie on record about your filming permits, but I refused." Clint placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, promising that she was safe now. Officers guided her toward an ambulance, but not before she managed a brave smile. Renewed determination filled Clint's heart. He remembered the day he first read the city's accusation letter, how it all seemed like a misunderstanding at the time. Now it stood exposed as a vicious scheme, one that nearly cost a person's life. He looked at Darla. "We have enough now. Let's finish this." Within an hour, the judge called an emergency session in the main courtroom, despite the late hour. He wanted to put a swift end to the matter. Police stationed themselves at every door, ensuring no more disruptions. Clint, Darla, and the city attorneys took their seats. The judge, eyes blazing with righteous anger, addressed the court. "I've received reports of a kidnapping directly tied to individuals who aim to sway this court's proceedings. This court will not bow to intimidation. We have new evidence that strongly suggests a conspiracy to defraud the public and frame Mr. Eastwood for damage he did not commit." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "Therefore, I am dismissing the charges against Mr. Eastwood, effective immediately. Furthermore, I recommend a full investigation into the parties named in these documents." A hush fell on the spectators. Then applause broke out, along with frantic note-taking by reporters. Clint exhaled, a wave of relief washing over him. Months of pressure, danger, and uncertainty finally eased. Darla gripped his arm, smiling through tears. The city attorneys simply folded their papers and left in silence, their faces grim. They knew their case was dead, possibly taking down several city officials in the fallout. Outside, news cameras rolled as people cheered for Clint Eastwood's vindication. But Clint didn't linger to bask in the spotlight. He had one more piece of business. He, Darla, and Reggie drove straight to a police station where they met the kidnapped clerk again. Now safely seated in a protected room, she gave an official statement identifying the men who snatched her and confirming they worked for one of Garza's security teams. The detective beamed at Clint. "Between her testimony and your documents, plus the kidnapper's confessions, we can build a strong case against Garza. He won't slip away this time." For Clint, the relief was immense but came mixed with sadness. People had been hurt, reputations ruined. He thought about the hooded informant who risked his life to deliver evidence. He recalled the girl whose father sat on the preservation committee, frightened by rumors. He even felt a twinge of empathy for the judge, who had been so sure at first that Clint was just another celebrity ignoring the rules, only to learn how twisted the system had become around him. Finally, Clint returned home to find a voicemail waiting on his phone. It was from Neville Garza himself, oozing sarcasm. "Congratulations, Mr. Eastwood. You've made quite the scene. But don't think you've won. People like me, we don't lose that easily." A beep ended the message. Clint stared at the phone, breath hitching. Even as the walls closed in on Garza, he remained defiant. Exhausted but resolute, Clint slumped into a chair, recalling the final words the judge spoke when dismissing the charges. "You have shown commendable understanding of legal detail, Mr. Eastwood. I regret that I nearly fined you without proper cause. It appears you've schooled us all today." Yes, Clint Eastwood had proved himself not just a movie legend, but a legal genius. Yet the echoes of Garza's chilling call told him that, while the trial was over, a new battle might be brewing. There was still one chapter left in this story, and it would demand the same courage that had carried him through every test so far. A week passed, and the city hummed with talk of indictments and shakeups at City Hall. Newspapers ran headlines about deep-seated corruption, pointing to Garza's real estate empire. The public praised Clint Eastwood for standing firm, even as rumors spread that Garza had gone underground, dodging the swirl of investigations. Clint returned to his film set, which felt like an oasis of normalcy. Crew members welcomed him with cheers, thrilled to hear the charges were dropped. He walked through the old ranch house set, verifying camera angles, discussing scenes with actors. For the first time in months, he experienced a sense of calm, the chaos of the courtroom behind him. The film's story was about justice and redemption, and now it held a deeper meaning for him. But it wasn't long before reality intruded. One afternoon, Darla approached him with urgent news. Garza was spotted at a private airstrip outside the city. Rumor is he's fleeing the country. Clint considered this quietly. If he escapes, the city might never fully recover the money he stole, and the truth about who else was involved might stay hidden. Darla nodded. The authorities are trying to track him down, but he's slippery. That same day, the rescued clerk bravely gave a televised interview. Her voice trembled as she described her abduction, but she refused to hide her face. "I won't let fear control me," she said. "I want everyone to know how greed and corruption almost ruined our historic courthouse and an innocent man's life." Her statement put more pressure on Garza, shining a spotlight on his crimes. Meanwhile, a new building inspector verified the courthouse filming location. He concluded that Clint's production had caused no significant damage at all. Far from being destructive, Clint's crew had taken extra care to protect everything, especially the historical elements. This final report squashed any remaining doubts. Yet, in a quiet corner of his mind, Clint couldn't rest easy. Garza's parting words echoed like a warning. Clint sensed that Garza might try one last desperate move before slipping out of the country, something to strike back at the man who exposed him. Reggie's security team stayed on high alert, watching for suspicious cars or unknown visitors. Late one evening, Clint finished a long day of filming. He drove home on a winding road outside the city. The night sky glittered with stars. The air was peaceful, almost lulling. Suddenly, headlights appeared in his rearview mirror, approaching fast. He tensed, recalling the black SUVs from earlier incidents. He slowed at a bend, hoping the car would pass, but it lingered just behind him. Alarmed, Clint turned onto a side street, the same route he often took to avoid traffic. The car followed, headlights glaring. His palms grew sweaty on the wheel. Could this be Garza's men again, seeking revenge? Clint had no illusions about fighting a car full of armed goons alone in the dark. He grabbed his phone, trying to dial Reggie's number, but a jolt rocked his car. The trailing vehicle bumped him from behind, sending a spark of panic through his body. He tried to accelerate away, but they bumped him again, harder. His phone slipped from his grip. A million thoughts raced through Clint's mind. He recalled every stunt driving lesson he'd ever done. Heart pounding, he steered into a wide skid, dust flying, hoping to confuse his pursuer. The other driver struggled to keep pace around the sudden curve, giving Clint a narrow window to escape. He floored the gas, tears stinging his eyes from the rush of adrenaline. But the attackers persisted, engine roaring behind him. At the next intersection, Clint spotted a chance, a narrow road that led to a public parking area near some shops. If he could get to a crowded place, maybe they'd back off. He swerved onto the street, tires squealing. The attacker accelerated, aiming to ram him one last time, but misjudged the angle. Their car clipped a lamp post, screeching to a halt. Clint watched in the rearview mirror, seeing smoke drift from the hood. Relief surged through him. He didn't stop. Instead, he sped to the nearest police station. Shaken but unhurt, Clint filed a statement. The police dispatched units to find the damaged car. An hour later, an officer reported that the suspects had fled on foot. Clint suspected they were Garza's men, exacting a final attempt at revenge or intimidation. Although terrified, Clint felt grateful to be alive, and more determined than ever to see Garza face justice. By morning, the city was on fire with the news of the near assault on Clint Eastwood. Public outrage soared. Even those who doubted Clint's innocence saw he was clearly being targeted. The pressure on law enforcement rose to a boiling point. That same afternoon, a tip came in about Garza's location. He was holed up at a yacht club, allegedly preparing to sail out of state waters. The police stormed the yacht club at sunset, catching Garza in the middle of packing. As news cameras arrived, they captured the dramatic image of officers leading him away in handcuffs, his expensive suit creased and his perfect hair disheveled. He glared at the flashing lights, refusing to speak. Once Garza was in custody, the floodgates opened. Indictments rolled out against city council members who had accepted bribes. Contractors who planned to demolish historic sites for quick profit were questioned. The more investigators dug, the more rot they uncovered in that circle of corruption. The courthouse bomb threat, the break-ins, the kidnapping, everything tied back to a desperate plan to chase away any obstacle, including Clint Eastwood. Days later, as the city began to heal from the scandal, the judge invited Clint to a small reception in the courthouse hall, honoring the people who stood up for truth. The rescued clerk was there, wearing a bright smile and a cast on her arm. Dr. Park joined, celebrating the protection of the historic building. Even the police who foiled the kidnapping mingled with the crowd. The judge raised a glass of sparkling cider in a symbolic toast. "To justice," he said, eyes resting on Clint. "And to a man whose surprising legal brilliance taught us we must always remain humble before the law." A round of applause followed. Clint blushed slightly, a warm feeling spreading in his chest. He had not sought out this role, but fate had dropped him in the center of a storm, and he had responded as best he could. When the judge approached and extended a hand, Clint shook it firmly. "I owe you an apology," the judge confessed. "I underestimated you. Had I imposed that fine and ended the hearing early, the corruption might never have come to light." Clint smiled, humility shining in his eyes. "I appreciate your honesty, Your Honor. None of us saw what was really going on until it was almost too late." By the end of that week, Clint's film wrapped up its final scenes. The cast and crew held a small party on set, congratulating each other. Many recognized that the story's theme, justice and redemption, mirrored the real-life drama they had all just experienced. Darla made a heartfelt speech, praising Clint's steadiness and courage, drawing laughs when she called him our secret lawyer. In truth, Clint felt changed by the ordeal. He had always been known for calm strength, but now he understood the power of law and how it could be twisted if good people looked away. He considered making a film one day about these events, to show that even in a modern world, one voice can expose shadows if it stays true and fearless. As for the historic courthouse, it remained standing, soon to be restored properly. Tours increased, thanks to the publicity around Clint's case. Children on field trips would pass by displays of old records, never knowing how close the building came to ruin. But in time, the truth would become part of its lore, a reminder that justice, while fragile, can triumph when defended by people of integrity. On a quiet evening, Clint finally got a moment to himself, sitting on his porch, listening to the distant hum of city life. His phone buzzed with messages of congratulations from friends and family. Reporters kept asking for interviews, but he politely declined most. He needed a rest. The smell of fresh night air filled his lungs, and for the first time in a long while, his mind was at peace. He could still recall the chilling moment the judge banged the gavel, announcing that crushing fine. He remembered the hush that fell over the courtroom when he cited that obscure legal statute, turning the tide in an instant. He remembered the terror of threats, bomb scares, kidnappers, and bullets. But most of all, he remembered how determination, truth, and a bit of grit had carried him through to the final victory. Now the chapter was closed. Garza was behind bars, the courthouse saved, and Clint Eastwood free to pursue his passion for storytelling without the shadow of false charges. As he sipped a glass of water, gazing at the moonlit sky, a quiet sense of triumph warmed his heart. He had earned a rare title few would ever expect, a master of the courtroom, as well as the silver screen. The judge had tried to find Clint Eastwood, then realized, in a dramatic twist that captivated an entire city, that the legendary actor was actually a legal genius. And in the end, justice was served, leaving the city with an unforgettable story of courage, cunning, and the power of truth.